I'm very honored to be here. When Sean first approached me about doing the story project, he said it was because he had looked at the children's book for the All Pikes Peak Reads that he mentioned, the one and only Ivan, and I didn't know whether to be flattered or offended that he thinks of me when he thinks of Silverback Gorillas, but I will go with flattered, and I'm really happy to be here. Let me kind of start a little bit in the middle of my story, and hopefully that will give you some perspective of where I jumped off when I started thinking about how to tell my story. And that would be in my career at the zoo. It was around 2006, and one of the managers at the zoo came up with this idea that's called defining moments. And the way that she presented this to the staff was, at some point in all of our lives, we had something happen to us that steered us in the direction and made us love animals in a way that became our life. And so she encouraged the staff at the zoo to every day try to do something for someone at the zoo that may be one of those defining moments for them. As part of an exercise, she asked us to think about and talk about what was our defining moment. And for me, my very first memory in life is actually with animals. I was 2 years old, it was 1982, and I was at Wheeler Farm in Salt Lake City, Utah. My mom had taken us there with my cousins because I'm sure we were burning down the house, and it was to go get some energy out. And I don't remember much about it except for a lot of really tactile things. I remember milking a cow. I remember how it felt. I remember how the udders looked. I remember how it smelled. And I remember picking up chicken eggs, and the fact that they were warm was fascinating to me, that this had come from a living animal. And that is literally my first recollection of life on Earth as me. As I moved through childhood, animal things became kind of a theme. So when all the other little girls were playing Barbies, I actually had my cardboard brick blocks, and I was building zoos for my stuffed animals at home. I have photographs of me with these towers that are full of all my bears and giraffes and rabbits. I had cut out food for them. Everything ate carrots, by the way. I think we might have just had orange construction paper at the time. And I'd made signs for them, so they all had names, and I wrote histories of where they had come from and what they were like. And so while other little girls were combing hair and putting on high heels, I was scooping imaginary poop, which little did we know would become a foreshadower. As I got a little bit older and a little more sophisticated, I recruited my sister when it would rain, and we would actually go outside and collect worms, all the worms that we could find. So again, all my friends were playing Barbies, and I was gathering worms. And we would stage worm circuses in our backyard. So it was complete with 3 rings. I had this excellent jump rope that was a nice ring maker. We would make the rings. We had a high wire act. We had, the worm trapeze. And for the grand finale, we had the worm cannon, which really consisted of me launching a worm at my sister. Pastor Brown, I may need your help later because I'm pretty sure if I don't go to heaven, I'm going to be greeted by giant worms on the other side. And my poor parents, in order for them to leave their deck, we would actually charge a nickel for them to come to this worm circus. So, entrepreneur really early on. The worm training that we were doing actually got a little more advanced. And as I got into my older toddler years, so when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I started training the squirrels that would visit our backyard. This is not a made-up thing. We have photographs of me feeding the squirrels at the back door, and my mom tells me that if I didn't come down early enough in the morning to feed them, they would actually knock on the door, waiting to be let into the dining room. So as a 6-year-old, I had squirrels in the dining room, I had worms in the backyard, and all sorts of manner of things happening. These are all things that were just kind of fleeting things as a kid, and things that I just thought were fun, and now that I put them all together, they were all kind of pushing me in a certain direction. So as I moved into middle school and high school, other things start to become important. You realize that boys are not super gross, and I began to play sports, which, well, maybe they are a little gross. But sports became a really important part of my life. I played lacrosse throughout high school and college. And things started to get a little muddy for me in terms of what I really, really wanted to do. Until that point, had you asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? First of all, I wanted to be a street sweeper. That was my very first ambition in life. But right after that, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I thought that was the end-all, be-all. That was how I was going to connect with animals. As I got into high school, I still volunteered at the Humane Society, but the sports part of my life started to kind of occupy a little more of my brain. And so I really thought, well, maybe I need to do physical therapy, or maybe I need to do sports medicine. That might be where I really need to live. My senior year of high school, I designed my own internship, and I convinced them to let me basically do two, where I interned with a veterinarian, but I also interned with a sports medicine professional here in town. I then ended up in college. And in college, when I had to declare my major, I declared kinesiology with the intent of I was going to do med school, I was going to do sports medicine, and that was where I thought maybe I needed to go. It maybe seemed a little more grown up than my 5-year-old ambition to be a veterinarian. But I also declared a second major of psychology. And I did that for the specific purpose that I was always really interested in why animals did what they did. And that was really why I chose that major. I went through the first several years of college on my course. I did pre-med classes. I went through all the hoops that I needed to go to. And my junior year, halfway through my junior year of college, so this was the year 2000, I decided I needed to go abroad, and I really needed to see the world a little bit differently and kind of break out of where I was. And so I chose to go to Australia and spend 6 months in Australia. I've had several people ask me why I chose to go to Australia out of all the places I could have gone, and the honest-to-God truth is when I was a little kid, so back to the little girl, we had a set of National Geographic books on our bookshelf that highlighted the animal species from every continent. And I obsessed over the Australian book, and it is the book that made me decide to go do that. So I went. I thought it was going to be a good time, different beer, hot Australian guys with accents. And I got 6 months into my time down there, and it was going to be time for me to go home, and I decided I wasn't ready. And the reason I wasn't ready was I had started to have kind of some clarity again, being away from the college advisors, being away from the people that were telling me what classes to take and what was coming next, and trying to figure out calculus. And the thing that got me that clarity was I started visiting zoos and animal sanctuaries anywhere that I traveled within the country, because I, of course, wanted to see up close all these amazing animals that I had seen in the book at home that made me make that decision. And so I decided to extend my stay. And my delightful squirrel letting into dining room parents never questioned it, and they just said, okay. And I can almost pinpoint the moment when I decided I didn't think I wanted to do sports medicine, and I didn't even think I wanted to be a veterinarian anymore. And it was at an animal rescue a little ways south of where I was living. It was a city called Wollongong on the east coast of Australia. And they were doing rescue rehab with wallabies and kangaroos. So wallabies get hit by cars, or kangaroos get hit by cars, just like deers do here, except some of them have joeys in the pouch. And so they were rehabbing these animals and then re-releasing them into the wild. And that struck such a nerve with me because it hit on the behavior piece. You were teaching this animal to fend for themselves as a wild animal again. And it wasn't just the sick animals. They were dealing with animals on a day-to-day basis that were alive and well and had personalities and needs. And one lady who doesn't even know that she was a defining moment for me let me bottle feed a wallaby joey while I was there and play with 2 wombats. And anyone who knows me knows I'm slightly obsessed with wombats. And when I say slightly, I mean totally obsessed with wombats. And I think that, honest to God, was the day that I decided I was on the wrong path. I came home. It was 2001, the end of 2001 in December. I dropped my pre-med track, and I finished out my psychology degree. I ended up working for the dean of the psychology department. I trained his rats for his learning lab that he had going. I know, totally weird, but rats will do anything for Fruit Loops, I swear to God. And that experience in Australia made me think, I think I really need to be in the zoo world. That's somewhere where I feel like I have passion and I can do something. And so I applied for a job at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, and 3 days after I graduated in May of 2002, I started at the zoo. But I started in the education department. It was the job that was open, and I was like, I'm in. I'll win them over. I'm good looking. No. But I will find a way. So I actually started out leading overnight programs. I taught preschool for them, and I eventually started working in the children's zoo with chickens, of all things, which I was actually thrilled about, and chickens are tremendously smart, just sidebar. So I worked in the education department for a year, and after being there for a year in 2003, a slot opened up in the animal care department, and I jumped on it. I knew that was where I needed to be, it was what I wanted to do, and it just happened to be an area that was really cool because it had a little bit of everything. We had small monkeys, we had birds, and we had, best of all, big cats. I had always been really fascinated by big cats, but in the animal world, you kind of classify yourself as, well, I'm a hoofstock person, or I'm a cat person, or I'm a primate person. I'd always thought, I'm going to be a marsupial person, because I'm psyched about marsupials, they're super cool, they're kind of weird, and I can totally dig on that. The first day that I worked those big cats, and in specific, a snow leopard named Kubla, and I'll probably get a little misty. I warned Sharon, when I get into the end part of this, some of it makes me tear up a little bit. It sounds weird to say, but that cat changed my life. He was the best teacher I have ever had, and he made me understand what my actual true passion was, and that's to train animals. As a kid, I read the Dr. Dolittle books, and you watch the cartoons where they talk to animals, and you're like, God, that's so cool. As an adult, in reality, I know, unless you're taking the drugs that Charlie takes, that's not possible. But when you can train animals and you can train them well, it is the closest you can come to talking to animals. And so in 2003, a coworker and I, we decided we wanted to be the first zookeepers in the zoo to hand inject the big cats, which means we were going to ask them to voluntarily come over to the side of their enclosure, lean a hip in, and they were going to let us give them an injection. They have to have vaccines just like dogs and cats at home do, and we did it. And it is one of the best days of my life to have that have happened and to have that animal trust you enough and to have enough communication with you that they allow that to happen. So snow leopards, sold from day one. They are an animal, if you guys have not visited them at the zoo, they are such an interesting dichotomy because they're in the wild, they're known as the ghost of the mountain because they're really hard to find, they're really hard to see, they're very secretive, they're very quiet, they hide well, but on the other side of things, when they're comfortable, they are the most rambunctious, bouncy, flippy, poofy, crazy things you have ever seen, and they're just captivating. And I have not met many people who can walk by, and if they're really take a look at them, not at least stop and admire them for a minute. So 2008 was another defining year for me, where a couple things happened that kind of put me on the life path that I've been on for the last 5 years. And those two things were, they opened up a position at the zoo, which was called the Animal Behavior Programs Manager, and what that person was going to do was teach people how to train animals. And I was like, sign me up. Where do I put my name down in blood? Because I will give you all everything. The second thing that happened in 2008 is the zoo started a program called Quarters for Conservation. And what happens with that program is a quarter from every admission of every person that comes through the gate gets earmarked for conservation projects. The great thing about that project and that program is that they allow the staff at the zoo to submit ideas for projects that they are passionate about and want to make a difference in. Most people in the zoo world have some sort of passion in some way for conservation. You can't work with those animals and not want to make their lives better out in the wild. But when you think about a lot of the things that are going on, it's hard to get your arms around how you make a difference as one person, and you have this entire country and this entire population, this whole species that needs help. Quarters for Conservation is a way for the staff there to actually start to get their arms around that a little bit. So I submitted a project in 2008, that first year, for snow leopards. It was selected, and we worked with a group called the Snow Leopard Trust. And I could spend the entire hour talking to you guys about the work that they do, but they actually work directly with communities and making a place for snow leopards in the future, saving place for them in the wild, and making it part of the culture and part of the communities that actually share that space. It's not a big government organization coming in, laying down the law, and then swooping out. They actually are changing things from the ground up. So it was the big vote getter that first year that we ran it. We raised over $11,000, I believe, that first year. And as part of the proposal I put in, I honestly didn't think we would ever even get over $3,000, which seemed like a mind-blowing big number to me. But as part of the proposal, I'd written in, hey, if we get over $10,000 shot in the dark, I'd really love to go to Mongolia and see what they're doing. And in 2009, July of 2009, I was actually afforded that opportunity to go travel and see this animal that had impacted my life so deeply. And this is where the last defining moment I want to tell you about comes in. And this one, I never make it through without crying, so brace yourself. So again, I really could spend an hour telling you about that trip, but the gist of it was we brought together, they have a program called Snow Leopard Enterprises where women do traditional handicrafts, it's felted handicrafts, that then are sold, and then the profits come back to them. So it's really a way to increase the livelihoods of the herders that are in the snow leopard area. A lot of them live on the equivalent of $2 a day, so it's extreme poverty. We brought those women together for the very first time, everyone that was a participant in that program, to meet, which was earth-shattering and amazing in and of itself. But the second half of that trip, we actually traveled down to the Gobi Desert, and they have a long-term study down there where they're tracking snow leopards. They have radio collars on them, and they're learning about what they do and kind of learn more about them because not a lot is known. While I was there, the very first night we were in the Gobi, we were sitting in a meeting, and it was a lot of the men who were herders, and they were working out how to start. They have a livestock insurance program. So if a snow leopard comes in and kills a goat, they can be reimbursed so that decreases the likelihood they would go out and have a retaliatory killing on a cat. And during this meeting, there was this very weathered old man sitting in the corner who looked like an elder, and I was really surprised that he wasn't saying much because typically the elders in the room will have a lot to say, they share a lot, and they're very well listened to. And he said nothing the whole time, and I was really kind of keyed into that. And then at the very end of the meeting, he turned to all the younger men in the room, and he said something in Mongolian, which I did not understand at the time, and everyone was very quiet, and then everyone got up and left. And I asked our translator after everyone had left, what did he say? And they said, well, he had told the young men, I think it's great if you guys need this program, but for me, if that cat needs one of my goats to survive, it's my gift to them. And I said, well, gosh, that's really nice of this guy to say that. And the woman that works for Snow Leopard Trust that I was traveling with, she said, let me tell you a little bit about him. His name was Dorj. And Dorj used to be a poacher. And in the late 80s or early 90s, he was hired by a Japanese tourist to track snow leopards because this tourist wanted to photograph them. He was really interested in snow leopards. Dorj, being a poacher, was a tremendously skilled tracker and very good at finding cats. And so he took this man out, they found the snow leopard, the guy took the photographs that he wanted, and that tourist was so moved that he gave Dorj his camera. Now, for someone who lives in the world that Dorj lives in, that camera is the equivalent of me handing you a Ferrari and saying, here you go. It was something of huge monetary value, and he decided in that moment that if someone felt that strongly about that animal, that they were willing to give up something that valuable, that it must be something worth saving. And he told me later through the translator, that was the day I stopped shooting guns and started shooting photos. I came home, and Dorj was fascinated with my digital camera that I have. It was an old 35 millimeter. Not a lot of places to develop film out in the Gobi Desert. So he really liked the fact that you could see the photos right away. But when I got home, my sister-in-law is a professional photographer in California. So along with her help, some donations from family and friends, and our local Zookeeper chapter, we actually pulled together some money and were able to send him a digital camera. And I still now, 4 or 5 years later, get photographs photographs from him from time to time. So George, for me in my adult life, is a great reminder that it is those small things. It's those cameras that may have not meant a lot to the tourist, but changed his life. It's the mom that allows squirrels in the dining room. But it's those small things that really help you find your way. And as I look forward, I had a baby 18 months ago. I really look forward to knowing in the next 30 years, what are the small things that are happening right now for me that will change my voice moving forward, and more importantly, what's happening for her. That's all.